right. Good morning, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? Go ahead and just give me a shout out if you can. All right, beautiful. Good to see you all. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll just have you join palms as we get started. And you can repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. All right, and you can put the palms down. So good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. It's a great movie, by the way, if you've never seen it. It's an old Peter Sellers movie, called classic, called Being There. Even though we're here, it's some of you here I know have seen it probably, but it's an incredible movie. 2 hours, which goes to show you what can happen if you do basically nothing. I mean, he does a lot, but for me, it's a very Buddhist and Taoist movie. If you're just sitting there, being present with things as they arise, and so much of our day is crafted around some sort of plan or idea or strategic thinking or kind of this mental manipulation. Just a lot of planning involved. And the movie Being There, he basically plans nothing, has very little recollection of past or acknowledgement of future, and he just stays present with things that are happening, which is really cool. And I won't say too much. I don't want to ruin it for you if you see it. But again, if you just joined, I'm talking about the movie Being There, Peter Sellers. I think it's on Netflix. But go ahead and check it out. It's pretty cool. So we'll start with a very brief question, maybe just to give some time for people to settle in. And I think the question is, how much of your time do you spend planning your future? So if you are joining us for the first time, welcome. There's a chat box there you'll see somewhere on your screen. Feel free to just type your response in there. Again, the question, how much time do you spend planning? You can answer however you'd like, as short or as long as you'd like. You may sit there for 5 minutes and plan your answer. So again, how much of our time are we planning things? I'll go ahead and type that in. How much time do we spend planning our future? Yeah, so again, if you're just joining us, the question of how much time do we spend planning our future? Um, the idea behind Buddhist practice is really to learn to stay present and be with things as they are, which is very difficult for a lot of people. We're often doing one thing, physically being in one place, but we're actually mentally somewhere else, or we're um, lost in the past or lost in the future. And, there's a flip side to this where a lot of times people often think that no planning is the way to go. And I'm personally not a fan of that either. I think to me, there's a healthy balance between planning and having kind of thoughts about present and how they apply to the future. But if we spend so much time planning our future, we're actually missing out on the present moment. And the reality is, no matter how much you plan, very rarely does it ever work out exactly how you thought. The root of Buddhist teachings are to cut through cravings and desires. But the Buddha taught that there's also healthy cravings. So we have the craving of ending suffering, right? Without the desire to end suffering, without the craving to end suffering, without this want to suffer less, none of us would be here right now, including myself. So it's important to recognize healthy cravings, healthy desires that are there as well. So let's see. Again, the question, if you just joined us on YouTube, is how much time do we spend planning? What do we have here? Probably not enough. I wing it for the most part. So again, there's that recognition of maybe I need to plan more. I think the important part, and I started to get into this and stopped, but the important part is to understand that as we plan and as we structure things in our lives, to not be attached to the outcomes. That you can plan all you want, but you don't know what the outcome or result is going to be. So too much, again, important to acknowledge and recognize maybe that you plan too much, Ida. Michael, a lot. I'm planning the rest of my day right now. Yeah, well, then you should just, Michael, put this on mute and you can just spend the next 45 minutes planning. Let's see, we got almost constantly. So yeah, there's a constant planning. It's often happening. Megan, I initially thought 20%, but then realized I'm constantly planning my next move. Yeah, it's short-term, long-term planning. Everything is, so much of our days, again, are very kind of structured or systematic, or we're planning what we're going to eat. We're planning where we're going to go. We're planning what TV show we're going to watch or Netflix binge we're going to go on next. There's so much planning. Lila, yes, or rehashing the past, absolutely. And so the planning of the future, the rehash of the past, very similar in the sense that we're just not present with anything that's happening. I've got planned for the next 20 years. Good luck with those, Samir. Hope they work out exactly as you hope. So like 80 to, so Megan went from 20 to 80 or 90. Well, that's good. At least that gives you 10 to 20% of your time to sleep. Greg, maybe 1/10 or 1/20th of my waking time. So that could be still a decent amount of time. What else we got here? A lot, especially thinking ahead to everything I want to do that day. Lisa, definitely. Constant, not enough time. Let's see, too much from Marley. A lot from Chuck. Too many unknowns, if it's too much or too little. So it just gives you a general idea of kind of where people are at. I think most importantly is to understand where you are at with it. How much of your time do you spend planning? Something to think about. Give me 1 second here. So just something to watch throughout your day as you continue to plan everything and hope that it goes exactly how you'd like it to. So I'm going to end this thing here, which I don't think I set up properly. Okay, sorry about that. So we'll go ahead and, well, there's a perfect example. I tried to do something I didn't plan at all, and I don't think I did it right, and it didn't work out. So again, there's that balance, the middle path in Buddhism, as we talk about, between planning and doing nothing. So I don't want to tell you that there's a perfect amount one way or the other. I think it's just important for you to explore in your life, how much time are you planning and how much time are you just kind of sitting around and letting life happen. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll start a meditation practice. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin, especially for those who are new. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is it working? Is it not working? You're doing it right? You're doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and the practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within the chaos. So posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, it helps. If you're sitting to the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows back to straighten, shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. I'll suggest closing the eyes if comfortable or slightly open. Mouth will be open or closed. I will guide us as we begin, and we will settle into a little bit of silence. And once again, starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, we'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Knowing throughout the practice, you'll hear sounds inside the room, outside. These are not distractions, not disruptions, simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. We'll start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continuing this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention and focus to the breath. And where's your mind? Lost in thought. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments of the practice, just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. And ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment. Has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reactions to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen and you react. More things happen, more reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun, but it is free. Sitting, breathing, learning to become aware of what you think and what you say and what you do. And that's it. For me, that's the heart of the Buddha's teachings. Becoming aware of your own actions, your own karma. Not what you get, but what you give. What thoughts, words, and actions do you bring into your day? Are they filled with greed and anger and ignorance, or are they filled with generosity, compassion, and wisdom? This is it. I've always found the Buddhist teachings very simple, although often people like to complicate them. The practice is very hard, but the teachings and the general guidelines for moral, ethical conduct and behavior is pretty clear. So with that, I would like to pause. And again, for those who are maybe joining us for the first time, welcome. I always like to use the rest of the time to open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. There's a chat box there on your screen. You can go ahead and just type in your questions or thoughts, and I'll respond. And we'll use the rest of the time for that. So I'll turn it over to you for questions. I'm just going to flip this light on, see if it makes it brighter. Yeah, a little better. Seemed a little dark on my end. Questions, thoughts, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you are sitting with. Challenges, difficulties. All right, so as we open up to questions, the question of I'm experiencing some guilt about the holiday season and all the presents my family and I are getting for each other. Um, so often when we experience, I think, just the emotion of guilt, let's just start with that. Uh, so if we remove the rest of the question of guilt about holiday season and gifts and things like that, and we just stick with guilt, guilt has a lot to do with the judgment that we have put on ourselves, or that we are feeling that others are putting on us. We spend a lot of our lives feeling guilty. I spent so much of my life feeling guilty. And, very often, most often, rightfully so. When we do things that harm people or harm ourselves, we feel guilty for that. And so I think it's important to recognize the emotions as they arise, whatever they may be. And so if guilt arises, very often, not always, there's something going on that we feel we shouldn't be doing. And I think it's important to recognize that. I'll say this before I forget it, but I think it's important to also recognize that when we feel guilty, that this feeling can really destroy us if we allow it to, because we can transform the feeling of guilt into shame, or feeling unworthy, or feeling not appreciated towards ourselves. So we want to be careful with guilt that it doesn't turn into so much judgment and hatred towards yourself. But explore the feeling of guilt. Explore why it's there. Explore if it's coming from kind of a self-imposed view, or judgments you've put on yourself. And then you mentioned family. See why we're having guilt towards them. What is it really that we're feeling guilty about? And I know you posed the question with, buying presents for family and each other. So then the question would be, I guess I would ask myself, if that was a current feeling of, have I felt guilty for this in the past? Or will I feel guilty for this in the future? What is it about right now that makes you feel guilty? And these are not necessarily quick questions, or quick answers, I should say. It's a lot of exploring. And often when we feel guilty, there are things that we can do to immediately change it or stop it. And there are things that we can do that just kind of continue to perpetuate these feelings of guilt. So we're always going to, in many ways, feel guilty for things that we do. And I think it's important to recognize, and this is really just for each person to kind of call on their own. Sometimes guilt is justified, sometimes it's not. That's really a personal decision and feeling. So, yes, every year, but especially this year, since so many are suffering. Sure. And so, okay, so there's where the feeling is coming from. And we are in this crazy pandemic, which has polarized and heightened everything. And, for me, I'm very conservative with behaviors during a pandemic, and cautious and hiding out and staying home, and really believe that that's what should be going on. So that's my personal view. But what's interesting is that all of a sudden the entire world, or not the entire world, that's definitely not a true statement. Let's just say Megan, since you asked the question, all of a sudden Megan is deeply concerned about everybody else in the world. That's beautiful. So the question then is, when and how do we reach a place in our lives where every day we are deeply concerned about everyone else in the world? Right? Last year, the year before that, prior to a pandemic, there were so many pandemics going on in the world, and so many things going on in the world that were causing so much pain and suffering. But we didn't feel guilty then. So explore that as well. What is it now that's making you feel so guilty? Because the world was a mess a year ago. Um, and hopefully soon this pandemic will be behind us and the holiday season will arrive another year from now. And at that time, there will be so much pain and suffering in the world. It'll just be from something else. So I'm not trying to minimize the pandemic, but to understand that there is always pain and suffering in the world. And what is it about right now that's making you feel the guilt is important to explore. Um, so just some thoughts on that. As always, and this is not about right or wrong answers or ways to do things that I think are correct, simply opportunities to explore the nature of one's mind and why we choose to do what we choose to do. So hopefully that's helpful. Sitting with anxiety and trying to accept it, let it be here. Like you said, it's difficult. Yeah, definitely. The experience of anxiety is, it's based in fear. It's based in worry. And I think it's important to understand that as long as our mind is wrapped up in the future, there's going to be anxiety. And so it is difficult, but trying to embrace the impermanence of the emotions, understanding that anxiety is just a impermanent emotion that is arising. And again, trying to sit with it. And again, there are no answers to this. It's difficult, yes. So continue to try to sit with it. Bill, I think I'm sleeping okay, but I've been more sleepy than usual during meditation. Any suggestions? I would do an eyes open practice. I would again, you said you're doing it okay, but I would keep an eye on your sleeping habits and patterns and making sure you're trying to get up early and get some exercise in, get the heart rate going. And for me, ultimately, and I'm personally an eyes open meditation practitioner anyway. So even when we sit here, as I start you all, my eyes often are closed as I start, and then I just open them slightly and gaze straight down. So my eyes are always open during meditation practice. For me, that's what I learned through the Zen practice, and that's to me the most applicable because we live our lives with our eyes open. To me, I'm not a fan of closing the eyes during meditation. Even though I always instruct people, eyes open if comfortable or slightly closed, meaning whatever you want. But I just believe that eyes open is more applicable to our daily lives. Although often people use meditation as an escape, so they kind of want to close their eyes and think they're tuning everything out. But for me, Buddhist practice isn't tuning out, it's tuning in. Someone led a little discussion with some college kids the other day. And someone asked a question, and he said that he was doing his 10-minute meditation, and he was just sitting there for 10 minutes thinking and thinking and thinking, and trying to do his meditation, but his mind kept racing. And then at 10 minutes, the alarm that he had set for his time went off. And as the alarm sounded, he said he felt like he just wasted 10 minutes of his meditation because he was now aware of the fact that he had just been thinking for 10 minutes. And I said, that alarm sounding was actually the start of your meditation practice. It was the only thing that brought him to the present moment, which was the awareness that he had just sat with a racing mind for 10 minutes. So it's this constant struggle of coming back to the present moment. Your mind is not going to stop racing, but bring it back to the present moment is really what the practice is about. And so when we go through our days and we feel guilt and we feel anxiety and we feel all these types of emotions that arise, can we come back and just sit in present moment? So hopefully that's helpful. Eyes open for sure. Other questions, thoughts? I keep coming back to Megan, the question about the guilt. And again, questions like this have come up a lot over the years that don't relate to the pandemic. And I think it's common to and healthy to find a balance that there's suffering in the world, uh, but and there's always work that we can do to alleviate that suffering around us. Um, but to be careful, I think, and this isn't gift related, this is just in general, to be careful that if we internalize that suffering and we feel so much guilt and shame for our lives, I don't find that healthy. Um, Knowing that there's suffering out there in the world, uh, for me, the practice is to work on suffering less so I can be of benefit to others. So if I am more calm and more clear and more kind and more compassionate, then I can help others. And I think that's important. So just continue to explore that the suffering is there, um, and what work can we do to help alleviate it. It's such a drag that we as humans always want things to be good. We haven't evolved enough to naturally accept all conditions. Yeah, I mean, I understand. I think I understand the question or the comment. It's really just a comment. But I'll just throw this out there as an additional thought that the Buddhist teachings, I think, are a balance between accepting all conditions, but also recognizing that you create these conditions. So if I go out and I'm in a really mean, angry mood and I treat someone terribly, and then I just pull out this Buddhist card and I say, well, you're just supposed to accept these conditions. I have to understand that I created those conditions. So, again, without having a dialogue and face to face and really exploring back and forth the nature of your comment, it's hard to know, but I'm just going to expand on it for everybody. Is really just to keep an awareness on this kind of throwing the towel in the air, and just saying, oh, everything is just as it is. It is just as it is, but we created that. And for me, my master used to say that the bodhisattva practice is to create causes that create conditions that lead to benefiting all sentient beings. So for me, one of those things was creating the Dharma Bump Temple with those of us that, for those of us that created it, was that we saw that there was a need to create a space that would allow people to cultivate and practice kindness and compassion. So it would have been very easy to say, well, this city of San Diego is just filled with mean, angry, miserable people, and that's just how it is. But we create conditions, causes and conditions. That's what karma is, law of cause and effect. So the bodhisattva practice is to create causes that create conditions, that create additional causes that then create conditions. That's the practice. So, and then, of course, learning to be with things as they are is important as well. Just not removing the role we have played in creating conditions around us. Right? If we have an unhealthy dynamic or unhealthy relationship with someone, it's very easy to say, well, that's just how it is, deal with it. But the real practice is to recognize, what is my role in this? What is the reason that this dynamic is unhealthy or relationship is unhealthy? I have to explore that deeply. Other thoughts, questions? Good questions. I'll do one more question as we wrap up here. Have you found that your thought patterns have changed over time with your practice, or do you just have more awareness of your thought patterns? It's a great question. And I've found both to be true. Um, it was funny years ago, not that many years ago, I guess 3 years ago, uh, when that Southwest Article magazine came out. Um, and it was about really my life and my journey with Buddhism. And if you're ever interested, the Southwest magazine I just found out recently is the online version's not online anymore. So unless you have one of the limited edition print versions, but Lions Roar republished it, most of it. It's like 80% of the article. It's called "The Bully and the Buddhist," I think is the title. But if you just Google "Bully and Buddhist," Lions Roar, you'll see it. Again, the Southwest magazine, it's not there anymore online. But after that article came out, I was contacted by someone, and there were some interviews, and what they said to me was that they were so fascinated by the fact that one thing I shared in there is that it's not so much that my thoughts have changed, but that I just don't act on them. And that, to this individual, was really the most profound part about I think the lesson was that as we grow, as we evolve, as we cultivate a spiritual path and practice, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're just going to like hit some little button and magically all your thoughts are going to be perfectly pure and clear and kind. The real practice is to have these thoughts and to not act on them. So, to your question directly, and that's why I say it's really yes and yes, a little bit of both, that the awareness of thoughts are there constantly. The ability to choose how to react to these thoughts is there almost always. The thoughts that I have definitely have changed over the years. The thought patterns have changed, but it doesn't mean all of them, and it doesn't mean that they're just gone. Uh, but things we think, things we say, and things we do, and that's why I always talk about what I learned as think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. The more we focus on thinking good thoughts, speaking good words, and doing good deeds, the more we'll do that. And I'll close with this kind of quick story. Megan, glad you got a signed copy. One of the things that I used to tell the story a lot was that when I came back from monastery life, and I grew up on a baseball field and playing sports, and cussing and swearing every other word out of my mouth. And then I spent 11 months in a Buddhist monastery in Taiwan, living with monks and nuns every day. And I didn't hear a 4-letter word for 11 months. And nor did I say one for 11 months. And when I came home after that experience, when I first started to hear those words, they sounded really ugly. But I'd never removed myself from that environment or situation long enough to recognize how ugly they actually sounded. Now, I'm not here judging people who use 4-letter words. That practice for me wore off, and I use them again. Definitely not nearly like I used to. But they will come out every once in a while. and I'm aware of it. I still have the thought. I still may say it. But it was fascinating to be in that environment where you don't hear it for 11 months, and then it sounded really ugly. One habit I did break completely. I used to, and again, I think a lot of this maybe just came from sports too, but I used to spit a lot. The baseball field, you're spitting, you're kicking the dirt, whatever it is. And that was one thing I noticed there, that I never saw anybody spit, which is really odd, but it was just something I noticed. Nobody spit on the ground. And so I stopped doing that completely. And one thing that, one of many things, but one thing that is just kind of unique that stood out to me was when I came back, and still to this day, 15 years later, I don't spit on the ground. And it just seemed odd to me. Like, why would we spit on the ground? I mean, it's disgusting for one. But if you have something you need to spit, find a trash can, find a cup, find something to spit into. But why would we spit on the ground? I just found it to be completely gross and disrespectful. But for 28 years of my life, I never would have thought that. So certain thought patterns change, certain views change, certain judgments change. But the most important is to change your actions. So you could have 1,000 negative, angry thoughts all day long, but if you don't do anything with them, that's progress. So work on that. All right, so I'm going to close on that. We'll go ahead and join palms. Good questions. And we do a transfer of merit. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. So thank you for being here. A couple quick announcements before you head off. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma Bum. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple about 14 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhism and put it into terms that make sense to those of you who show up. So typically when we're open, we have classes every night. We've been closed since March 12th, so about 8 months now. Everything we do is online. We have YouTube Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights, and Saturday morning. Everything else is on Zoom. We have a huge recovery Sangha. Sangha is community, family groups, teenage groups, college groups, Monday through Friday morning meditations. So plenty of stuff to do online. Just go to the website, thedharmabums.org, and you'll see the schedule there. We don't have an open date yet. We'll continue to stay closed and just be with things as they are, understanding the role and conditions that we play in all of that. Buddha for You, we did start a couple weeks ago selling stuff online. So if you do need anything, let me know, or just go to the website. That's about it. I appreciate you all being here. Again, if you are brand new, think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. That's really the heart of this practice. So I hope you're all safe. Stay home, wear a mask. Don't do anything that would put anyone at risk. So I appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.